Hey everybody, Peter Green from Agile for All here. It's Tuesday, and Tuesday is Top of Mind Tuesday. So, what's top of mind for Peter Green today? Well, it's something that came up in our video from yesterday when we were doing Trending Agile. And I mentioned that I've noticed this pattern with books, that books often get released not intentionally, I don't think, but there's like a pairing pattern that happens. So you have like the idea book that gets people excited about a new idea. And then people start saying, well, how would I actually do that? And then another book gets released that's kind of the how-to book. So I thought I would go a little bit deeper and give you a few examples of that. So this will be a shorter one today, just a few instances of that pattern I've noticed. The one that I mentioned in the video yesterday was the idea book was Dan Pink's Drive. And Drive is all about what leads to high motivation, engagement at work. And he talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And he describes the research, and he does great storytelling around that, and basically makes the case that we should care about the factors that lead to high engagement at work because high engagement is correlated with better performance and a better place to work, and all kinds of goodness comes out of that. And then I mentioned that a few years after that, Doshi and McGregor's book, Primed to Perform, came out and summarized the research again, but also gave a lot more how-to. So what would you actually do in order to create those conditions? And as a bonus in this video, I'm going to give you another how-to book. But this how-to book did not get written like as a response to Drive. This how-to book, I didn't even notice the connection at first until somebody else pointed out to me. This book is called Turn the Ship Around by David Marquet. Some of the best creative nonfiction writing I've read. Great storytelling. David Marquet was the commander of a naval submarine, a nuclear submarine, and long story short, took over a submarine that he was unprepared for because they changed which sub he was going to be the captain of kind of last minute. And so in crisis, had to figure out, how do I effectively lead in this submarine where I don't know the systems on the ship, I don't know the staff well, what do I do here? And the approach that he took, it turns out, was almost perfectly correlated with Dan Pink's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And so the how-to book, in this case, Turn the Ship Around, if you want a high engagement organization, Turn the Ship Around gives you some very simple advice around language that a leader can use. So I'm going to leave it as a cliffhanger to figure that out. And I'll also put a link in the show notes to a blog that I wrote that kind of points out those links. So that's an example of these pairs. Drive being the idea book, Primed to Perform, and or Turn the Ship Around being how-to. How do you actually do the things? All right, so a few others. Some of these were the same authors, some of them different. So an example of this would be an idea book, Blue Ocean Strategy. So Blue Ocean Strategy came out years ago, decades ago. I'd have to look up the exact release date, but Blue Ocean Strategy has been around for a long time. It's a book on thinking about new products, and the metaphor there is that a lot of innovation is really not innovation at all. It's a whole bunch of companies going after the same customers, what they would call the red bloody waters, right? And so if you're a shark and you're looking for lots of fish to eat, you don't want to go to the bloody ocean, go to the blue ocean. So it's a bit of a kind of a metaphor, but the metaphor, I think, makes sense, right? So we want to look for the blue ocean. There's plenty of blue ocean out there. And so they explained this idea, and then about 20 years later, they finally wrote a book that said, I think we finally figured out how to get people to regularly do this. And they came out with a book called Blue Ocean Shift that lays out the tools that they've developed since writing the book that help organizations regularly go after blue ocean. So some of my favorite tools that we teach to product owners, product managers, CEOs, and startup founders are coming from Blue Ocean Shift. So that's another example. Idea book, Blue Ocean Strategy. How-to book, Blue Ocean Shift. Same author in this case, same authors. All right. Another example of that in a similar space is the book The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. So Eric Ries summarizing and I would say converging a whole bunch of things from like Steve Blank and the lean movement. Wrote this book called The Lean Startup. This idea that the most wasteful thing that a lot of companies do is build features, services, products that nobody wants or buys or uses or pays for. That's the most wasteful thing we could do. So if we want to actually eliminate waste in most organizations, we should stop building products, features, and services that nobody pays for, buys, or uses. And so the Lean Startup described like the idea of build, measure, learn, and coming up with hypotheses and doing validated learning and a whole bunch of great ideas that were really influential. And then a few years later, Ash Maurya wrote the book Running Lean, which is kind of like, hey, if you want to do the Lean Startup idea, here are a whole bunch of tools and techniques that will help you do that. So I see Lean Startup as an idea book, Running Lean as a how-to book. Last example that I'll give in this video is one of my favorite ones. Again, it's a same author situation. So Patrick Lencioni wrote a very famous book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, where he talks about these what teams need to overcome if they're going to get to high performance. And he kind of describes it as a pyramid, that if you can't do the foundational thing, which is if you can't overcome an absence of trust, then you can't do the next thing, which is you might, if you can overcome the absence of trust, then we can get to the next thing, which is you have to deal with the avoidance of conflict. If you can get to a healthy approach to conflict, then people can actually make commitments to each other. If we can do that, then we can hold each other accountable. Then we can focus on results. So that creates this pyramid called the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. This book is in the genre of a business parable. So it's told kind of in storytelling form, not just in traditional business book format. And very famous book, one of the most cited books on teams that I come across. And then a few years later, Lencioni wrote another book called Overcoming the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, where he shares his strategies again for how to help teams overcome those 5 dysfunctions. So I always thought that this was, I joke in a lot of classes that this is the most genius business model ever, which is to write a book describing here are all the things that might go wrong, and then a year or two later and say, oh, you wanted to solve those problems? Oh, okay. Well, here's the book that tells you how to solve them. So I know that's not what Lencioni was doing, but I say that 100% tongue-in-cheek, but the how-to book, Overcoming the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, gives a lot of great advice on things that Lencioni's found to be regularly helpful with teams. So that's a few examples of this pattern. I'd be really curious to hear what examples you see of this pattern of an idea book coming out and then a how-to book coming out. Kind of, sometimes I call the idea book the evangelical book, like here's a great new idea, you should try it. And then the how-to book, which is here's how you actually do that. So what are some examples that you've seen of the idea book and the how-to book, of that pair of books pattern? If you're interested in these types of topics, in these types of videos, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. If you like this one and you want to share this with some friends, maybe you've got friends that are readers too, that are always hunting down the new books, go ahead and share this with your friends, like the video, and hope to see you on the comments below. Thanks.